Hello friends, welcome to the HFY Ode, where we bring you the new science fiction stories for you, and new adventure, new world.
They said humanity didn't belong among the stars, that we were too fragile, too emotional, too soft for the kind of warfare that shaped empires. The Galactic Coalition had seen 1,000 species rise and fall, and when Earth sent its first candidates to the War Master Academy on Krell Prime, the betting pools opened within hours. How long until the humans quit? How many days before they broke? No one bet on the girl who never spoke. The shuttle bay smelled like ozone and recycled air. A sharp metallic tang that clung to the back of Maya Reyes' throat as she stepped on a Krell Prime for the first time. The platform stretched in every direction, massive beyond comprehension, built by a civilization that measured its cities in light minutes rather than kilometers. Overhead, the sky wasn't sky at all, just the underside of another tier, another layer of this impossible world. She kept her duffel close, didn't look around too much. The other human candidates clustered together near the receiving area, 15 of them total, Earth's best and brightest according to someone's metrics. Maya had read their files during the 6-month journey. 3 decorated officers, 7 academy graduates with honors, 2 champions from the Earth defense games, 1 prodigy who'd scored perfect marks on every tactical simulation ever designed, and Maya, who'd been selected for reasons no one had bothered to explain to her. Reyes. The voice belonged to Captain Morris, the liaison officer who'd barely spoken to her the entire trip. He looked at her the way people always did, trying to figure out what they were missing. You're in Cohort 7. Report to the East Atrium. She nodded, picked up her bag. That's it. Morris frowned. No questions. Maya shook her head. He waited, like people always waited, expecting more. When she didn't give it to him, he made a notation on his datapad and moved on to the next candidate. The guy with perfect scores was already asking 3 questions at once, gesturing with both hands, bright-eyed and eager. Maya walked east. The academy revealed itself in pieces. Massive training grounds that could simulate any environment in known space. Armories that held weapons from 100 different civilizations. Tactical centers where holographic battles played out in real time, controlled by AI systems older than Earth's recorded history. And everywhere there were aliens. The Krell themselves were 7 feet of scaled muscle, built like evolution had specifically designed them to break things. The Vashti moved in packs, 6-limbed hunters with eyes that could track heat signatures through walls. Quellan delegates observed everything with their 4-chambered brains, calculating probabilities while their tentacles took notes. And then there were humans. 15 confused primates in borrowed armor. Cohort 7 assembled in a training yard the size of a football field. Maya counted 63 candidates from 17 different species. The human contingent stood together, a nervous, not a familiar biology in a sea of scales, chitin, and configurations that didn't make sense to eyes that evolved on Earth. The War Master who addressed them was Krell. Of course he was. They all were here. His name translated roughly to Stone Who Breaks Armies, which everyone shortened to War Master Stone because human mouths weren't built for the clicking sounds in the original. You are the weakest generation I have seen in 4 cycles, Stone announced, his voice like gravel in a blender. Half of you will quit within the first month. Another quarter will be removed for failure. The rest will either die in training or wish you had. The Vashti candidates chittered with what might have been laughter. The Krell looked bored. The humans looked terrified, except for Perfect Score Guy, who was taking notes. Maya watched the War Master's stance, the way he distributed his weight, how his 3rd finger tapped against his thigh. He was lying about something, though she couldn't tell what yet. Training begins at dawn, Stone continued. You will be evaluated on combat effectiveness, tactical acumen, survival instinct, and adaptability. The only rule is this: don't die permanently. Medical technology can fix most failures, but resurrection is expensive and reflects poorly on your species. Someone laughed. Stone's head swiveled with predatory precision. You find death amusing, Quellen? The tentacled candidate's bioluminescent patches flashed in what might have been an apology. Stone held the stare for 3 long seconds, then moved on. Dismissed. Sort yourselves into training units. I suggest you choose partners who might actually keep you alive. The yard dissolved into chaos as 63 candidates scrambled to form alliances. Species clustered together. The humans started to do the same, but perfect score guy, his name was Lieutenant Shun, was already pitching a tactical framework for optimal team composition. Maya walked to the edge of the yard and sat down. She watched. The first challenge came 36 hours later, before anyone had really slept or figured out how to work the alien food dispensers that sometimes produce nutrition and sometimes produced what might generously be called industrial lubricant with flavor. Urban warfare scenario. War Master Stone announced, standing before a massive holographic projection of a ruined city. 3 teams. Objectives will be transmitted to your squad leaders. You have 6 hours. The teams formed quickly. The Krell dominated one squad, all muscle and tactics built around overwhelming force. The Vashti formed another, pack hunters who communicated in subsonic clicks. The third was mixed, Quellens, a few humans, and some species Maya didn't recognize. She wasn't on any of them. Reyes. Stone's voice cut through the crowd. You're solo. The yard went quiet. Shun stepped forward. Sir, that's not. She'll be killed in the first engagement. Then, she'll learn faster than most. Stone's eyes, black and depthless, fixed on Maya. Unless you'd like to withdraw? Maya stood, shook her head. Good. Your objective is simple. Survive and reach the extraction point. If you're still functional at the end, you pass. The city materialized around her in layers of hard light projection and environmental simulation. Real enough to hurt. Real enough to die in if you were stupid about it. 3 teams, full squads with support and tactics. And Maya. The first hour was quiet. She moved through the ruins like water finding cracks. Never where the sight lines were obvious. Never where the sound carried far. The Krell squad announced their presence with weapons fire and aggressive advancement, claiming territory through volume and violence. The Vashti were silent, but visible if you knew what to look for. They marked territory with scent traces, coordinated through patterns that human eyes could almost catch. The mixed squad was arguing. She could hear them through the walls, Chen's voice rising as he tried to coordinate 3 different tactical philosophies into something coherent. Maya found a vantage point in a collapsed tower and waited. The Krell hit the mixed squad first. It wasn't even close. Chen tried to organize a defense, but half his team didn't understand the commands, and the other half understood but disagreed. The Krell rolled through them like water through paper, eliminating targets with practiced efficiency. Chen went down fighting, at least. Took 2 of them with him before the stun rounds found his center mass. The Vashti avoided the Krell entirely, moving through sectors the heavy squad had already cleared, picking off stragglers and securing objectives through speed rather than strength. Smart. Maya tracked their patterns, noted the pack leader, identified the scout who ranged furthest from the group. At hour 4, she moved. The scout never saw her. Maya dropped from a ledge, used the alien's own momentum to redirect it into a wall, and was gone before the pack could respond. No kill, just a disorientation that cost them 3 minutes of coordination. At hour 5, she hit them again. Different angle, different approach. This time she collapsed a structure they were using for cover, forcing them to relocate and breaking their formation. The Krell eventually found the Vashti. It was brutal and efficient and over in 90 seconds, which left one Krell squad, confident and aggressive, sweeping the final sectors toward the extraction point. And Maya, she didn't fight them. Couldn't. 15 Krell warriors with full tactical support against one human with a stunner and half a protein bar? That wasn't combat, it was arithmetic. Instead, she went around. The extraction point was a rooftop landing pad in the city center. The Krell approached from the main thoroughfare, a textbook advance with overlapping fields of fire and proper spacing. Maya came from below, through the maintenance tunnels they hadn't bothered to secure, because who fights from beneath when you can control the high ground? She reached the pad with 4 minutes to spare. The Krell arrived, saw her sitting there, and stopped. Their squad leader, a massive specimen whose scales bore the scars of 100 engagements, approached slowly. Not aggressive. Curious. Ow! The translator rendered it in flat standard. Maya didn't answer. She'd already won. Words would just complicate things. The holographic city dissolved. War Master Stone materialized in the center of the training yard, and 63 candidates reformed around him. Most of the humans looked dazed. Several aliens looked impressed. Chun looked angry. Results, Stone announced. Krell Squad, efficient but predictable. Vashti Pack, coordinated but inflexible. Mixed Team, catastrophic failure of command structure. His eyes found Maya. Human Solo, mission success with 0 casualties sustained. Silence. Reyes displayed what the Krell call Teshkara, the silence that moves. What humans might call guerrilla warfare. She understood that survival is not the same as victory, and victory does not require combat. Stone's mandibles clicked in what might have been approval. Acceptable work. Chun stood. Sir, she got lucky. If the Krell had secured the tunnels, they did not, Stone interrupted. Because she correctly assessed that they would prioritize territory over infrastructure. That is not luck, Lieutenant. That is reading the opponent. The War Master moved on to the next evaluation, but Maya felt the weight of 62 sets of eyes tracking her movement as she returned to her place at the edge of the group. Not all of them were friendly. Training intensified. The Academy cycled through scenarios designed to break candidates in specific ways. Zero-gravity combat that made the humans vomit while the Vashti thrived. Desert survival that killed 2 Quellans from dehydration. Voidwalk exercises that exposed everyone's deep space phobias. The human contingent fractured. Chun formed a core group around himself, trying to prove human tactical doctrine could compete with species that had been waging war since before Earth had continents. 3 candidates washed out in the second week. 2 more followed in the third. Maya, train alone. She watched everyone. The way the Krell favored their right side, because their biology anchored their primary heart there. The way the Vashti communicated through patterns too subtle for most species to detect. The way the Quellans calculated odds, but sometimes got trapped in analysis loops. She learned without speaking, adapted without explaining. When the instructors paired her with other candidates for joint exercises, she followed their lead until she understood their patterns, then adjusted. You're wasting potential. War Master Stone cornered her after a particularly brutal close-quarters combat drill. You could lead. You see things others miss. Maya met his eyes, shook her head. Why not? He leaned closer, scales rasping. Fear? Pride. She pointed her throat, then made a slashing gesture. Stone's translator chirped. His expression shifted. You can't speak? Maya nodded. For the first time since she'd arrived, the War Master looked uncertain. The file said nothing about this. She shrugged. The files never did. Then, how do you command? Stone demanded. How do you coordinate? Maya pulled out her data pad, typed quickly. I don't. I follow until I understand. Then I act. Stone read it twice. That's not how war works, Reyes. Battles are won through coordination, communication. She typed again. Battles are won by understanding the opponent better than they understand you. The War Master stared at her for a long moment, then made a sound that might have been a laugh. You're either going to revolutionize tactical doctrine or get an entire platoon killed. He turned to leave, then paused. For your sake, human, I hope it's the former. But Maya didn't plan to command a platoon. She just planned to survive. The incident happened during month 2, in a training scenario built around multi-species coordination. 30 candidates divided into 3 teams, each with mixed species composition. The objective: secure a series of strategic points while defending against automated defense systems and competing teams. Chun led one team. A Krell veteran named Groth commanded another. The third went to a Quellan tactician whose name translated to something like probability swims through chaos. Maya was assigned to Chen's team. Good, Chen said, reviewing the roster. Reyes has proven she can operate independently. I want her on long-range reconnaissance. Scout ahead, identify threats, report back. She nodded. Can you manage a comm relay? One of the other humans asked. You'll need to transmit threat assessments. Maya held up her datapad. Text only? The human, a young officer named Torres, frowned. That's going to be slow in a tactical situation. Chen waved him off. She's fast enough. Besides, her observations are usually more accurate than anyone else's anyway. Let her work. The scenario launched. Maya moved ahead of the formation, using the terrain to mask her approach. The defense systems were sophisticated, rotating patrol patterns, overlapping sensor coverage, adaptive responses to detected threats. Standard doctrine said you disabled them through coordinated strikes or overwhelming firepower. Maya went under them. She found a maintenance conduit, mapped the power distribution network, and identified 3 critical junction points. One message to Chun: can disable defenses. Need 8 minutes undetected. His response came back immediately. Proceed. We'll create a distraction. Chen's team hit the eastern approach hard, drawing the defense systems into a concentrated response pattern. The Krell and Quellan teams saw the opening and converged, turning the scenario into a 3-way firefight. Maya worked in the silence beneath the battle. The junction points were protected, but not against someone who could fit through spaces the designers hadn't considered human accessible. She disabled the first 2 with simple power reroutes. The third required actually cutting the hardline connection. Her knife sparked against alien alloy. The lights went dark. All of them. Defense systems, facility power, environmental controls. The entire scenario grid crashed into emergency mode. Maya climbed out of the conduit into absolute chaos. Chen's team was pinned down without functional shields. The Krell were advancing, but couldn't target effectively in the dark. The Quellans had scattered, their sensors useless without the facility's baseline power signature to filter against. And somewhere, warning klaxons were screaming about catastrophic system failure. She'd cut too deep, severed something that wasn't supposed to be severable. War Master Stone's voice boomed through the emergency channels. All candidates evacuate immediately. This is not a drill. Except Chen's team was trapped. The Krell had advanced to block their escape route, and without power, the emergency exits weren't opening. Maya ran, not away, toward. She found Chen's position by sound. Torres was yelling commands. Someone else was calling for medic support, and Chen himself was trying to coordinate an orderly withdrawal that the team was too panicked to execute. Maya grabbed a flare from the emergency kit, cracked it, and threw it directly at the Krell position. Krell eyes were adapted for low-light conditions. The magnesium flare hitting their position was like staring into a sun. The advancing squad recoiled, their formation breaking. Maya grabbed Chen's arm, pointed to a side corridor he'd missed in the chaos. That's not on the map. She didn't wait for him to finish. Just moved. The team followed because standing still meant getting caught in whatever catastrophic failure was bringing the facility down around them. The corridor led to an auxiliary shaft. Definitely not regulation, probably not safe, but out. They emerged into the open air of Krell Prime just as the training facility began its controlled shutdown sequence. Emergency crews were already responding, and War Master Stone stood in the center of the evacuation zone, counting candidates. 63 entered. 63 emerged. Chen's team arrived last, covered in dust and breathing hard. Stone's eyes found Maya. Explain. She pulled out her datapad, but Chen spoke first. My fault, sir. I ordered reconnaissance beyond safe parameters. Reyes correctly identified a vulnerability in the defense grid, but the power distribution wasn't documented in our briefing materials. You cut a primary conduit, Stone said flatly. Maya nodded, which could have killed everyone in the facility if the fail-safes hadn't engaged. He paused. It also revealed a critical design flaw that we've been trying to identify for 3 years. The contractor swore that Conduit was inaccessible to anything larger than a maintenance drone. He looked at Maya's frame, small even by human standards, built like someone who'd learned early that being overlooked was sometimes the same as being safe. Unintentional sabotage resulting in accidental discovery, Stone mused. I'm genuinely unsure whether to commend you or expel you. Chen stepped forward. Sir, Ray has also got my entire team out when we were trapped. Without her, we'd still be in there. Stone's mandibles clicked. Did she? The flare maneuver was tactically sound. Another voice added. Groth, the Krell squad leader, approached. Crude but effective. She recognized our species' light sensitivity and exploited it without hesitation. I see. Stone looked at Maya for a long moment. You don't speak, Reyes, but you certainly make yourself heard. He turned to address all the candidates. Today's scenario is declared void. However, the tactical lessons stand. Adaptability matters more than protocol. Survival sometimes requires breaking things, including plans. Dismissed. The candidates dispersed, but Maya felt the shift in how they moved around her. Not quite respect. Not quite fear. Awareness. She existed now in their calculations. The silent human who'd accidentally brought down a training facility and somehow turned it into a tactical victory. Shin caught up with her before she reached the barracks. Hey, Reyes. She stopped. Thanks for the evac route. He hesitated. I've been thinking about your approach. The way you operate. It's different from what we're taught at the academy, but he trailed off, searching for words. It works. And I'm sorry I didn't see that earlier. Maya typed, different species, different tactics. You're good at what you do, but you're better at what you do, Chin said. Which is why I want you to know, if this goes where I think it's going, if we actually graduate and get assignments, I'd be honored to have you in my unit. She considered that. Typed, you'd hate it. I don't follow orders well. Chin laughed. Yeah, even noticed. But you know what? Sometimes the best soldiers are the ones who know when to ignore the mission brief. He walked away, leaving Maya standing in the corridor with her datapad and her silence and the growing sense that she'd somehow crossed a line she hadn't meant to approach. The academy noticed her now. That was dangerous. The months blurred together after that. More scenarios, more evaluations, more candidates washing out or breaking down. The human contingent stabilized at 8. Chin's core group, Torres, and Maya orbiting at the edges. War Master Stone's lessons grew more complex. Multi-theater operations. Asymmetric warfare. Diplomatic scenarios where the wrong word could start a war. That last one Maya excelled at, purely because she couldn't speak and therefore couldn't say the wrong thing. But the real education happened in the spaces between official training. Maya watched a Krell instructor demonstrate close-quarters blade work and noticed that their technique assumed opponents would meet strength with strength. She practiced counters built around redirection instead. She observed Vashti pack tactics and realized their coordination relied on continuous communication. Disrupt the signal, and the pack collapsed into individuals. She studied Quellen's strategic planning and found the exact moment their probability matrices locked them into predictable patterns. Every species had strengths. Every strength had a counter. And Maya collected them all, filing away observations in the notebooks she kept in 3 different languages: English, Spanish, and the shorthand she'd invented when words failed entirely. The final evaluation arrived without warning. Real combat. War Master Stone announced to the 16 candidates who remained from the original 63. Not a simulation. Not a drill. You will deploy to a contested zone on the frontier, where Krell peacekeepers are attempting to suppress an insurgency. Your objective is to survive, learn, and, if possible, contribute to mission success. Chen's hand shot up. Sir, we're not fully trained. You never will be, Stone interrupted. War doesn't wait for optimal conditions, Lieutenant. You deploy in 8 hours. Pack what matters. Leave what doesn't. The transport to the frontier took 4 days. Long enough for the 16 candidates to to realize this wasn't a training exercise, short enough that they couldn't really prepare. Maya spent the journey reviewing everything she'd learned about Krell tactical doctrine, frontier insurgencies, and the specific cultural dynamics of the contested zone. The briefing materials were thin on details, but heavy on warnings about collateral damage, civilian populations, and the political complexities of peacekeeping operations. In other words, there were no good answers, only expensive mistakes. They landed in a forward operating base that looked like it had been built in a hurry and fortified with whatever was available. Krell regulars moved with practiced efficiency, and everyone looked tired in a way that came from too many months of combat without resolution. The base commander, a scarred veteran named Stone Who Breaks Armor, briefed them personally. The insurgents call themselves the Free Sky Movement. They oppose Krell presence on their world, galactic coalition interference, and basically everything that isn't local rule. Tactically, they're unsophisticated but adaptive. Strategically, they have popular support in 3 of the 5 major population centers. Chun frowned. If they have popular support, why are we fighting them? Because their idea of local rule involves purging alien species from the planet, Stone Who Breaks Armor replied flatly, including the 2 million non-native residents who've lived here for generations. This isn't a political dispute, Lieutenant. It's ethnic cleansing with better marketing. The briefing continued, but Maya stopped listening to the words and started watching the body language. Stone Who Breaks Armor believed what he was saying, but there was frustration there too. The kind that came from fighting a war you couldn't win because the victory conditions weren't military. The first patrol happened the next morning. 8 candidates, for Krell regulars, 1 simple mission. Check on a farming settlement that had missed its scheduled supply delivery. Chun led the candidate contingent. Maya brought up the rear, as always. The settlement was quiet. Too quiet. The main square should have been busy with midday commerce. Instead, it was empty except for a few abandoned carts and the kind of silence that meant people were hiding. Spread out, Chun ordered. Standard search pattern. Report any. The explosion cut him off. Not close enough to kill. Close enough to deafen. Maya hit the ground as a second blast took out the building to her left. Through the ringing in her ears, she heard weapons fire. The distinct crack of Krell rifles answered by the chatter of improvised firearms. The ambush was textbook. Pin the patrol in the square, hit them from elevated positions, fade before reinforcements could arrive. Except the Free Sky Movement had made one miscalculation. They'd assumed the patrol would cluster together for mutual support. Maya was already moving before the third explosion. Not toward cover, toward the source of the weapon's fire. She'd spotted the shooter's position in the first volley, identified the firing angle, calculated the most likely retreat route. She reached the building from the side, not the front, went through a window instead of the door, found a shooter reloading, focused on the square below. The fight lasted 3 seconds. He was bigger, stronger, trained. She was faster, angrier, and had spent 6 months learning exactly how to break a Krell's defensive stance. The rifle clattered to the floor. Maya grabbed it, leaned out the window, and put 3 rounds into the building across the square where the second shooter was positioned. Not to kill, to suppress. Make them stop shooting long enough for the patrol to reorganize. It worked. Chun got the team to cover. The Krell regulars returned fire with professional precision. The ambush collapsed as the shooters realized their advantage was gone. By the time Maya made it back to the square, the engagement was over. Chun stared at her. You just assaulted a fortified position solo. She shrugged. He struggled for words. Tactically insane. Effective but insane. Maya typed. They weren't expecting anyone to move toward the fire. Because no one does that. Torres shouted. He was bleeding from shrapnel wound, but his eyes were bright with adrenaline. You're supposed to find cover and coordinate a response. By which time, they'd have faded, Maya typed. This way we took their weapon and disrupted their exfil. One of the Krell regulars approached. A younger soldier with fresh scales. The human is correct. The insurgents rely on superior mobility and hit and fade tactics. Aggressive counterassault is the only effective response. Aggressive counterassault by an entire unit, Chen corrected. Not one person with no backup. Maya didn't argue. She'd achieved the objective, stopped the ambush, protected the patrol. The methodology was secondary to the outcome. But that night, as the base analyzed the engagement, Stone Who Breaks Armor called her to his command center. "You're the silent one," he said without preamble. She nodded. "The War Master sent your file ahead. Said you had a talent for unconventional approaches." His eyes, older and harder than stones, studied her. "What you did today was either brilliantly adaptive or catastrophically reckless. I can't decide which." Maya pulled out her data pad. "Does it matter if it worked?" "Yes," he said immediately. "Because if you'd failed, you'd be dead, and I'd have to explain to Earth why one of their candidates got killed in an engagement we should have controlled." He leaned back. "But you didn't fail. You identified the threat vector, neutralized it, and turned an ambush into a tactical victory. That's uncommon." She waited. "I'm assigning you to reconnaissance duties," Stone Who Breaks Armor decided. "Separate from the main candidate group. You'll operate with our forward teams, gathering intelligence on insurgent movements and tactics." Maya typed, "Not a combat role? Combat finds you regardless of role, human. But your skill set is wasted in standard patrol operations. We need someone who can move undetected, assess threats, and make split-second decisions without waiting for command approval." He paused. "Think you can handle that?" She considered. This was dangerous. This was real. This was exactly the kind of thing that could get her killed if she made one mistake. She nodded. "Good. You deploy at dawn. Welcome to actual warfare, Reyes." The forward reconnaissance teams operated on a different frequency than regular patrols. No grand objectives, no territory to hold. Just movement through contested zones, eyes, and ears for a command structure that was perpetually 3 steps behind an enemy that lived among the population it claimed to protect. Maya learned the rhythm in her first week. Dawn insertions via stealth transport dropped 2 clicks from the target zone. Silent approach through terrain that shifted from agricultural sprawl to dense urban clusters to wilderness that had never been properly mapped. 8 to 12 hours of observation, recording patterns, identifying faces, tracking movements that might mean nothing or might mean an attack was coming. Then extraction, debrief, sleep for 4 hours, and repeat. Her partner was a Krell scout named Vesh. Young for a warrior, barely past adolescence by their standards, which still made him 200 pounds of armored muscle with reflexes faster than anything Maya had seen outside of training simulations. He didn't talk much either. They got along fine. Their third mission took them into the industrial sector of a city called Thresh, a sprawling mess of factories and refineries that had been built during the planet's colonial boom and never properly maintained. Half the buildings were abandoned. The other half might as well be. Perfect territory for insurgents. Movement patterns suggest staging area. Vesh observed his translator rendering the clicks and growls into flat standard. 3 buildings show regular foot traffic, but no commercial activity. Maya nodded, making notes on her data pad. She'd been tracking the same structures for 2 days, watching how people entered through service entrances and emerged hours later looking purposeful. They were planning something. She gestured toward the western approach, indicating a vantage point that would give them a better angle on the central building's loading dock. Vesh studied the route, calculated the exposure time, and grunted approval. They moved. The thing about reconnaissance was that it required a particular kind of patience Maya had spent her entire life cultivating. You couldn't force information to reveal itself. You had to wait for it, watch for the moments when people stopped performing and started being. It took 3 hours. The loading dock doors opened. 6 figures emerged, carrying crates with the kind of care that suggested either fragility or explosives. They loaded them into a transport with civilian markings, worked quickly, and disappeared back inside. Maya filmed everything. Vesh counted the crates, noted the vehicle's identification codes, and marked the departure vector. Then, the door opened again, and Maya's breath stopped. The figure that emerged wasn't part of the working crew. He moved differently, confident where they'd been furtive, commanding where they'd been hurried. He wore civilian clothes, but they fit wrong, like someone who was used to uniform and hadn't quite mastered the casual alternative. But that wasn't what stopped her breathing. It was his face. Human. She zoomed the camera, enhanced the image, checked it against the database of known insurgent sympathizers. No match, which meant either he was too new to have been cataloged, or he was working independently. A human. On the frontier. In an insurgent staging area. Vesh noticed her stillness. Problem. Maya showed him the image. The Krell's mandibles clicked in what might have been surprise. Human presence was not anticipated. Intelligence suggested the free sky movement opposed all off-world species. She typed quickly, they oppose alien presence. Humans might not qualify if they're anti-coalition. Distinguish between human and alien? Vesh considered. Possible. Earth is not a coalition founding member. Recent addition. Some political factions opposed integration. Maya watched the human talk with the crew, gesture toward the transport, then disappear back into the building. She filmed it all, but her mind was racing through implications. If humans were supporting the insurgency, the political calculus changed. Earth's position in the coalition was already tenuous, too new, too different, too prone to asking uncomfortable questions about how galactic governance actually worked. Evidence of human collaboration with anti-coalition forces? That could end badly for everyone back home. She needed more information. Maya signaled Vesh, I'm going closer. Negative, he replied immediately. Exposure risk too high. Need to confirm identity. Verify involvement. Send image to command. Let intelligence assess. She hesitated. That was the correct procedure. The safe choice. But Maya had learned early that correct procedures assumed you were working with complete information. And something about this felt incomplete, like she was seeing one piece of a larger pattern that wouldn't make sense until she understood the whole. She moved before Vesh could object. The approach was simple. Circle wide. Use the abandoned structures for cover. Approach from an angle where the building's sensor coverage had gaps. She'd mapped the surveillance grid on their first day, watching the site. 60 seconds to reach the western wall. Another 30 to find the ventilation access. She was inside the building before Vesh's urgent clicks caught up to her comm. Reyes. Extract immediately. This is not authorized. She muted the channel. The interior was exactly what she expected. A gutted factory floor converted into storage space. Poorly lit, smelling of industrial lubricant, and something organic she didn't want to identify. The crates were stacked in organized rows, each one marked with symbols that didn't match any standard shipping notation. Voices echoed from the far end of the space. Maya moved toward them, using the crate rows for cover. Can't promise delivery by the scheduled date. That was the human's voice, speaking English with an accent Maya couldn't quite place. North American, but filtered through years of somewhere else. The Krell patrols have been more aggressive this week. Then, find another route. A second voice, translated by her comm unit. One of the local species, probably the dominant political faction in Thresh. We paid for reliability. You paid for discretion. The human corrected. Reliability costs extra, especially when the coalition's pouring resources into this sector. Your species joined the coalition. Perhaps you should reconsider your allegiances. My species got drafted into a galactic empire they didn't vote for and don't particularly want. The human's voice carried an edge now. I'm here because I believe in local sovereignty. What's your excuse? The conversation continued, but Maya wasn't listening anymore. She was photographing the crates, documenting the symbols, building an evidence file that command would need. Then, her foot found the one loose panel in the entire floor. The metallic clang echoed through the space. Silence. What was that? Maya ran. Not toward the exit. That was compromised. Toward the one route she'd identified during her observation period, the maintenance shaft that led to the roof access because every industrial building had one, and people always forgot to secure them. Behind her, shouts. Movement. The human's voice cutting through. Lock it down. Nothing leaves this building. She reached the shaft, pulled herself up, and was halfway through when hands grabbed her ankle. Not the human. One of the local workers, strong enough to hold her weight, pulling her back down. Maya kicked, connected with something soft. The grip loosened. She hauled herself up and kept climbing. The roof access was locked. Of course it was locked. Maya pulled out her knife, standard issue, designed for utility more than combat, and jammed it into the locking mechanism. The blade snapped. The lock held. Footsteps on the ladder below. She rammed the door with her shoulder. Once. Twice. The pain was spectacular. The door didn't care. Third time, something gave. Not the lock, the hinges. Corroded from years of industrial atmosphere and poor maintenance. The door fell outward. Maya went through and onto the roof just as the first pursuer emerged from the shaft. The roof was flat, 40 feet across, with a 2-story drop to the street below and a 4-story drop to the alley behind. No easy exits. No cover. Just Maya and the 3 insurgents who'd followed her up. The human wasn't among them. "Stop," one of them said through a translator. "Surrender, and you won't be harmed." Maya backed toward the edge, calculating odds. 3 on 1. All of them armed, her with a broken knife and a datapad full of evidence. She couldn't fight them. She couldn't outrun them. She could jump. 2 stories to the street meant broken bones at minimum, probably worse. But alive. Still alive. With the evidence intact. 4 stories to the alley meant the rifle shot cracked through the air. Not aimed at Maya. Aimed at the insurgent on the left, who went down with a cry that the translator didn't bother rendering. Vesh's voice boomed from somewhere below. "Reyes. West edge. Now." She didn't hesitate. Ran for the western edge, saw the stealth transport hovering 20 feet below, saw Vesh leaning out with a harness cable. Jumped. The fall lasted forever, and no time at all. She caught the cable, felt it arrest her momentum with a jerk that rattled her teeth, and then she was being hauled into the transport as weapons fire sparked off the hull. The transport banked hard, accelerated, left the industrial sector behind in a blur of speed and adrenaline. Vesh's mandibles were clicking in what might have been laughter or fury. Unauthorized infiltration. Solo operation in hostile territory. Probable diplomatic incident. He paused. "Explain." Maya pulled out her datapad, miraculously intact, and showed him the photos. The Krell went very still. "Human involvement," he said finally. "This will complicate matters." She nodded. "Command will want a full report." She nodded again. "They will also want to know why you ignored direct order from your scout partner and compromised operational security." Maya typed, because correct procedure would have meant sending one photo and waiting for intelligence assessment. This way we have documentation, shipping symbols, and confirmation of active collaboration. Vesh read it. Clicked thoughtfully. "You are either very smart or very stupid. Human. Possibly both." "Probably both," she typed. The debrief lasted 6 hours. Stone, who breaks armor, wanted every detail. The building layout, the number of insurgents, the crates, the symbols, the humans' voice patterns, the conversation she'd overheard, the security response time, and the justification for her decision to infiltrate rather than report. "You understand," the commander said, his voice dangerously calm, "that if Vesh hadn't requisitioned an emergency extraction, you would be dead or captured?" Maya nodded. "You understand that your actions could be interpreted as reckless endangerment, insubordination, and potentially a violation of coalition rules of engagement." She nodded again. "Then, explain to me why I shouldn't send you back to the academy with a failure notation." Maya pulled out her datapad, typed for a long time, then showed him the screen. "The human I saw is coordinating supply routes for insurgent operations. The crates are marked with symbols that match the pattern used in the 3 major attacks last month. The refinery bombing, the convoy ambush, and the market district explosion. This isn't low-level collaboration. This is logistical support for strategic targeting. If I'd reported and waited for assessment, they would have moved the crates by the time confirmation came through. We'd have one photo of a human in an insurgent area, which proves nothing. Now we have documentation of the entire operation, which means intelligence can track the supply chain and potentially interdict the next attack. I made a tactical decision with incomplete information. It worked. If it hadn't worked, the consequences would have been mine alone. But it did work, and now we have actionable intelligence that might save lives. That's worth the risk. Stone Who Breaks Armor read it twice. Then looked at Vesh. Your assessment, Scout? The human is correct about the value of the intelligence, Vesh said carefully. She's also correct that her actions were tactically unsound and violated protocol. Both things are true simultaneously. The commander's mandibles clicked. Indeed, he turned back to Maya. You're going to become a problem, Reyes. The kind of soldier who gets results, but makes command nervous because they never know what you'll do next. She waited. However, he pulled up the photos on his display, studied the shipping symbols. This is good work. Excellent work. Actually, intelligence has been trying to map the insurgent supply network for months. He paused. I'm not sending you back to the academy, but I am restricting you to supervised operations for the next 2 weeks. You work with Vesh, you follow his lead, and you do not, under any circumstances, go rogue again. Understood. Maya nodded. Dismissed. She made it 3 steps before Stone Who Breaks Armor called after her. Reyes. Off the record. She stopped. That jump was impressive. Stupid but impressive. Try not to make a habit of it. The intelligence analysis came back 3 days later. The symbols on the crates matched a shipping company based in the outer colonies, human-owned, registered on Earth, and supposedly defunct after the owner died 5 years ago. Except someone was still using their codes. Someone with access to coalition shipping databases. Someone who knew exactly how to move material through frontier zones without triggering customs inspections. The investigation expanded. Quietly, because if word got out that humans were actively supporting anti-coalition insurgencies, the political fallout would be catastrophic. Maya wasn't part of that investigation. She went back to reconnaissance work, partnered with Vesh, following protocols. But she kept her eyes open for human faces in places they shouldn't be. And she found them. Not often, not obviously, but once you knew to look, the pattern emerged. A human transport driver in a neutral zone who somehow always knew where Krell patrols would be. A human medical volunteer whose clinic treated an unusually high number of insurgent casualties. A human journalist whose articles about coalition overreach showed up in insurgent propaganda feeds. None of it proved coordination. All of it suggested something deeper than individual sympathy. Maya documented everything, sent reports to intelligence. Waited. The response came from an unexpected source. Cadet Reyes. The voice on her comm was unfamiliar, the accent crisp coalition standard. This is Coordinator Thel of Coalition Intelligence Services. I'd like to speak with you about your recent observations. In person, if possible. Maya glanced at Vesh. The Krell Scout's expression was unreadable. I'll accompany you, he said quietly. This is irregular. The meeting happened in a secure room at the base's command center. Coordinator Thel turned out to be Quellen, for tentacles, bioluminescent communication patches, and the kind of eyes that tracked everything simultaneously. Thank you for coming, Cadet. Thel's translator was smoother than most. I've reviewed your reports regarding human involvement in insurgent activities. Your observations are concerning. Maya nodded. I need to ask you a direct question, and I need an honest answer. Thel's patches flickered. Do you believe these individuals are acting independently, or is there organized coordination? She considered. Typed. The pattern suggests organization, but I don't have enough data to confirm command structure or funding sources. But your instinct, someone is coordinating. The logistics are too clean for independent actors. Thel's patches went dark for a moment, the Quellen equivalent of a thoughtful pause. You understand the implications if you're correct? It means humans are actively working against coalition interests while Earth is trying to establish credibility as a member species. Maya typed. It could justify restrictions on human movement in contested zones. possibly sanctions against Earth itself. Precisely. Fell leaned forward. Which is why this investigation must be handled with extreme discretion. We cannot allow panic or political opportunism to override careful analysis. Vesh spoke up. What do you need from Reyes? I need her to continue doing exactly what she's been doing, observing, documenting, reporting. But I also need her to understand that this investigation is now classified at the highest levels. She cannot discuss her findings with anyone outside of approved channels, including other Academy candidates. Maya frowned. Typed, you want me to spy on other humans. I want you to help us understand whether there's a genuine security threat or merely unfortunate coincidences that could be misinterpreted. Fell's patches brightened. You're uniquely positioned for this work, Cadet. You operate in spaces others don't access. You observe without drawing attention. And, frankly, you're one of the few humans I've encountered who seems capable of separating tribal loyalty from objective assessment. Because I don't talk, Maya typed. Because you think before you act, even when you're acting rashly. Fell's translation carried what might have been humor. Will you help us? Maya looked at Vesh. The Krell Scout's expression was carefully neutral, but there was something in his posture that suggested warning. She typed, what happens if I find evidence of organized human involvement? Then we assess the scope, identify the leadership, and determine appropriate responses. Fell said, preferably before the situation escalates into something that damages Earth's coalition standing irreparably. And if I refuse to help, then you return to the Academy, complete your training, and someone else takes over the investigation. Someone who may not be as careful about distinguishing between genuine threats and innocent humans caught in complicated circumstances. Fell paused. I'm offering you the chance to protect your species, Cadet Reyes, by helping us find the truth. It was a trap and an opportunity simultaneously. Say yes, and she became a spy working against her own kind. Say no, and she abandoned any influence over how the investigation proceeded. Maya had never been good with impossible choices. She typed, I'll help. On one condition. Name it. If we find evidence of organized involvement, you bring me into the assessment discussions before any action is taken. I want to understand the full context before decisions are made that could affect Earth. Fell's patches flickered through several colors. That's irregular. You're a cadet, not an intelligence analyst. Take it or leave it. The Quellan studied her for a long moment. Then, the patches settled into steady blue. Agreed. But understand that your input will be advisory only. Final decisions rest with Coalition Command. I understand. Then, we have an arrangement. Fell stood, a complex unfurling of tentacles. Continue your reconnaissance work. Report anything unusual. And, Cadet, be careful. If there is organized human involvement, they won't take kindly to one of their own investigating them. The meeting ended. Vesh walked with her back to the barracks in silence. Only when they were alone did he speak. You've made yourself valuable to intelligence services, he said quietly. That is a dangerous position for one so young. Maya typed, I know. Do you? The Krell's eyes were ancient and knowing. Value means you cannot be easily discarded. But it also means you cannot easily refuse when asked to do things that compromise your honor. What would you do? Vesh's mandibles clicked slowly. I would remember that intelligence services serve larger interests, not individual truths. What they call discretion, others might call deception. What they call necessary, others might call betrayal. You think I shouldn't help them? I think you should help them with your eyes open, knowing that the truth you find may not be the truth they use. He paused at the barracks entrance. And I think you should remember that silence is not the same as invisibility. People notice you, Reyes, even when you don't speak. Especially then. He left her there, standing in the corridor with a datapad full of questions and a mission that felt like it might swallow her whole. Maya returned to reconnaissance work the next morning. But now every human face she saw carried weight. Were they sympathizers? Coordinators? Innocent people caught in circumstances beyond their control? She documented everyone, sent reports through encrypted channels to Coordinator Thel. waited for patterns to emerge. They did. 3 weeks after the meeting with intelligence, Maya identified a network of 17 humans operating across 4 contested zones. Not all of them were actively supporting insurgents. Some were journalists, some were aid workers, some were just trying to survive in places the coalition had destabilized through well-meaning incompetence. But 5 of them were definitely involved in logistic support. And all 5 reported to the same handler, the human she'd seen in the Thresh industrial sector. His name was Marcus Webb, former coalition contractor, discharged after a dispute about operational ethics in a previous conflict zone. He'd stayed on the frontier, established himself as a freelance logistics coordinator, and apparently decided that human independence was more important than coalition stability. Intelligence wanted to arrest him immediately. Maya argued for surveillance. "We don't know the full network yet," she typed in her report to Thel. "Webb is a coordinator, but someone's funding this operation. Someone with resources beyond what a discharged contractor would have access to. If we arrest Webb now, we lose the chance to trace the supply chain upstream." Thel's response came back within hours. "Your assessment is sound but risky. Every day Webb operates. More material flows to insurgent forces. More attacks. More casualties. I understand. But if we want to actually stop this, not just disrupt it temporarily, we need the full picture." There was a long pause before the next message arrived. "You have 2 weeks. Find me the upstream connection, or we move on Webb regardless." 2 weeks. Maya spent them living in the spaces between reconnaissance missions and intelligence work, sleeping 4 hours a night, and tracking financial transactions through databases she probably shouldn't have had access to. She found a pattern on day 12. Shell companies registered in 3 different systems, all ultimately owned by a trust based on Earth. A trust that had been established 50 years ago by families who'd opposed humanity's initial contact with alien civilizations. Families with money, influence, and a very specific ideology about human exceptionalism. They weren't supporting the Free Sky movement because they believed in local sovereignty. They were supporting it because every coalition failure strengthened the argument that humanity should have stayed isolated. Every human casualty proved that the galaxy wasn't safe. Every insurgent victory demonstrated that the coalition couldn't protect its own people. It was a long game, played across multiple fronts, designed to make humanity's coalition membership untenable. Maya stared at the evidence for a long time. Then, she encrypted everything and sent it to Coordinator Thel with a single note. "This is bigger than Webb. This is Earth politics playing out on the frontier." The response was immediate. "Report to secure facility immediately. Bring Scout Vesh. Tell no one else." The secure facility turned out to be a bunker 3 levels below the main command center, protected by security systems Maya hadn't known existed. Coordinator Thel was there. So was Stone Who-Breaks armor, and a Quellan she didn't recognize, wearing marks that indicated high-level coalition authority. Cadet Reyes, the unknown Quellan, said, "I am Administrator Kelth, Coalition Security Council. I've reviewed your findings." Maya nodded. "You've uncovered a conspiracy that threatens to destabilize Earth's coalition membership and potentially reignite isolationist movements across human-controlled space." Kelth's patches cycled through colors rapidly. Agitation, maybe, or calculation. "This is not a matter for military resolution. This is political warfare." She waited. "We have 3 options," Kelth continued. 1. We arrest everyone involved and risk turning them into martyrs for the isolationist cause. 2. We expose the conspiracy publicly and let Earth's government deal with the fallout. 3. We dismantle the network quietly and ensure this never becomes public knowledge. Maya typed, "Option 3 sounds like a cover-up." "Option 3 is damage control," Kelth corrected. "The families funding this operation have legitimate grievances about coalition policy. Arresting them won't address those grievances. It will simply drive the movement underground and make it harder to counter. So you do nothing? We do something very specific. Keltha's patches settled into steady amber. We cut their funding streams, we interdict their supply routes, and we quietly encourage Earth's government to address the underlying concerns before they metastasize into something worse. And Webb? Webb and his immediate network will be arrested on charges of arms trafficking and support for terrorist activities. That's public. That's visible. That shows the coalition responding appropriately. Kelth paused. The upstream connections stay classified. Forever. Maya looked at Vesh. The Krell Scout's expression was unreadable, but she thought she saw something like resignation in his eyes. She typed, "You're asking me to bury evidence of a conspiracy because it's politically inconvenient. I'm asking you to understand that exposing this conspiracy won't achieve justice. It will achieve chaos," Kelth replied. Earth is already struggling with its coalition integration. Half your population thinks we're benevolent saviors. The other half thinks we're colonizers with better technology. Evidence that prominent Earth families are funding anti-coalition operations will split your species down the middle. Maybe that's necessary. Maybe it's catastrophic. Kelth leaned forward. "I'm not asking you to like this decision, Cadet. I'm asking you to accept that sometimes the right choice is the one that prevents the worst outcome, not the one that delivers perfect justice." Stone, who breaks armor, spoke for the first time. "Reyes, you've done good work. Important work. But you're standing at a decision point where there are no clean answers. Only consequences." She looked at her datapad, at the evidence she'd compiled, at the truth she'd uncovered. Then, she looked at Vesh. "This is your choice, human," the Krell Scout said quietly. "Not mine. Not theirs. Yours." Maya thought about Earth, about the candidates still training at the academy, about the millions of humans trying to figure out what it meant to be part of something bigger than one planet. She thought about Marcus Webb, who'd probably thought he was fighting for human independence. She thought about the families who'd weaponized that fight for their own ideological purposes. And she thought about the insurgents on this planet who were being used by both sides and didn't even know it. She typed, "I want guarantees." "Name them," Kelth said. "Webb gets a fair trial. The humans in his network who weren't aware of the upstream connections get immunity. And Earth's government gets a full classified briefing about what you found so they can address the underlying issues." Done. "And I want confirmation that the funding streams are actually cut, not just rerouted. That will be verified by an independent auditor. You'll receive quarterly reports." "For how long?" "As long as you serve in coalition forces," Kelth said. "This becomes your responsibility, Cadet Reyes. You found it. You own it. You ensure it stays contained." It was a burden and a leash simultaneously. But it was also the only way to ensure the truth didn't get completely buried. Maya nodded. "Then, we have an agreement." Keltha's patches brightened. "The operation to apprehend Webb and his network will commence in 48 hours. You're not to be involved. Return to the academy, complete your training, and never speak of this to anyone without proper clearance." The meeting ended. Vesh walked with her back to the surface. Neither of them spoke until they were outside, under the alien sky of a world that wasn't theirs. "You did well," Vesh said finally. Maya shook her head. "You did," he insisted. "You found a truth that needed finding, and you made the hard choice about what to do with it. That's more than most warriors ever accomplish." She typed, "I feel like I just betrayed everyone." "You probably did," Vesh agreed. "But you also probably saved them. Both things are true. That's what command feels like, human. Welcome to it." He left her there, alone with her silence and her secrets. Maya stood for a long time, watching the strange sunset paint the sky in colors that didn't exist on Earth. Then she pulled out her datapad and started writing the report she'd send to the academy. The official version. The one that would go in her file. The one that would never mention families or conspiracies or impossible choices. Just a successful intelligence operation that disrupted insurgent supply lines and prevented future attacks. Clean. Simple. False. But necessary. She was learning that necessity tasted like ash. The transport back to the academy left 2 days later. By then, Webb and his network were in custody. The news feeds called it a major victory against frontier insurgencies. Coalition forces moving decisively to protect civilian populations. No mention of human involvement. No mention of Earth politics. Just another success story in the eternal struggle to maintain galactic peace. Maya watched the planet recede through the transport's viewport, wondering how many other success stories were built on buried truths. Chun met her at the Academy landing platform, grinning like she'd just returned from vacation instead of 4 months in a war zone. "Reyes, you're alive." She nodded. "We heard you got attached to forward reconnaissance." That's terrifying." "How was it?" Maya pulled out her data pad. "Educational." "Yeah, I bet." Chin's grin faded slightly. "You look different. Tired. For months of field work will do that." "Fair." He hesitated. "Listen, there's something you should know. While you were gone, the Academy changed the evaluation criteria. They're putting more emphasis on leadership and communication skills. Which means..." He trailed off. Maya understood immediately. "Which means candidates who don't speak are at a disadvantage." "I'm sorry. I tried to argue that your results speak for themselves, but War Master Stone said the final evaluations required demonstrated command capability." Chun looked genuinely upset. "It's not fair." She shrugged. It wasn't fair. It also wasn't surprising. The galaxy didn't make special accommodations for silent soldiers. "There's still time to work on alternative communication methods," Chun continued. "Tactical sign language, enhanced datapad interfaces, maybe even..." Maya held up a hand. "Typed, it's fine. I'll figure it out." "You sure?" "I'm sure." But she wasn't. Not really. That night, alone in her quarters, Maya reviewed the final evaluation requirements. Leadership scenario. Coordinate a mixed species unit through a complex tactical operation. Communication assessment. Demonstrate ability to convey orders clearly under pressure. Strategic planning. Develop and present a comprehensive operational plan to senior command. All of it required talking, explaining, convincing others to follow your lead through the power of your voice. Maya had never used her voice. Couldn't use it, actually. The doctors had been very clear about that after the accident that had stolen her words when she was 12. Permanent damage to the neural pathways that connected thought to speech. They could fix a lot of things with modern medicine. They couldn't fix that. She pulled out her datapad and started researching alternative command methods used by other species in the coalition forces. There had to be a way. She just had to find it.